Accessibility is kind of like a diet. You don't go and lose weight and never have to watch what you eat or exercise again. Accessibility is kind of like that. You just don't get to a point where you don't have to think about it no more because, every time you update a website, add new content to it, connect it to other websites, you are opening yourself up to either break or dent or bruise your accessibility. So I'm happy that Alex is one of the good guys who realized the benefit of accessibility even before he started seeing the number of new hosts and guests using his website to match up who have disabilities or who have an interest in supporting people with disabilities. And so he also understands that it is a continuing thing. We like to say progress over perfection because perfection is something you'll never achieve.
Welcome to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand with Nicholas Kuhne. So we have Maxwell Ivey with us today. Max is a blind serial online entrepreneur. His passion is for advocating for accessibility and inclusion by showing business owners what's in it for them. He shares the whys and hows and shares his knowledge through writing, speaking, teaching, consulting, and podcasting. So, Max, welcome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on the podcast, and I look forward to a great conversation.
So, Max, I see we've got some joint friends here. You've got Alex Sanfilippo, and I see you're a digital product accessibility advisor and beta tester at Podmatch. So maybe talk to me a little bit about that, and then we'll go into your background.
Right. So I have to credit Alex with a lot of things, but his wife tells me not to credit him with everything, or otherwise he'll be hard to live with. And Alicia is a dear woman to me, so I try not to get on her bad side. So basically, Alex has been a big part of my becoming involved in accessibility on a formal way. Because you see, I am blind. I'm a former carnival owner who started his first website in 2007. My dad's death forced the closure of our traveling carnival, and so I needed something else to do, and I started helping people sell rides on the internet. I had so many things to learn. The internet was so inaccessible back then, I had to teach myself how to code HTML just to get started. So I've been advocating for accessibility on pretty much a daily basis for over 15 years without really realizing who I was, what my brand was, or what I was doing. So I just felt like I was this guy showing up every day, doing the next thing to try to build a business of brokering used rides, and then later trying to build a business as a life coach and then as a podcast guest instructor before finally finding my way here. And this basically started in 2009 Podfest. I gave a talk at the Pichakucha, which is a short round-robin 5-minute thing where everybody gets 5 minutes to do one topic. And after I was through speaking on interdependence, or as I like to say, asking for help and accepting help when offered, Alex followed me out into the lobby and said, I got to meet that guy. So we became friends there. We went on each other's podcasts, and when he started Pod Lottery as an add-on to Podmatch, which, by the way, y'all, Pod Lottery is not a gambling site. It's just a fun way to help other podcast hosts generate reviews so that they can grow their audiences and gain traction on the search engines. So he wanted it to be accessible from the beginning, and he said, Max, you're the only person I know. I trust you, I believe in you, and I feel like you've been doing this forever. You just didn't realize you were doing it. So he hired me. And then once we got that going, he had me come over to Podmatch, and now I'm the regular accessibility advisor to Podmatch. And as they come out with new features, I test them and advise them on how to keep the website accessible, because accessibility is kind of like a diet. You don't go and lose weight and never have to watch what you eat or exercise again. Accessibility is kind of like that. You just don't get to a point where you don't have to think about it no more because, every time you update a website, add new content to it, connect it to other websites, you are opening yourself up to either break or dent or bruise your accessibility. So I'm happy that Alex is one of the good guys who realized the benefit of accessibility even before he started seeing the number of new hosts and guests using his website to match up who have disabilities or who have an interest in supporting people with disabilities. And so he also understands that it is a continuing thing. We like to say progress over perfection, because perfection is something you'll never achieve, and if you do, it's going to last 1 second maybe. So he hired me. A little while after that, a company called AudioEye, which is a big dog in the accessibility field, they asked me to come write for their website. And I initially turned them down because I didn't think I was qualified for the position they were offering. It required me to use a lot of Microsoft products, which I not only don't know how to use, I don't care to use them.
You're not
And
alone.
I told, yeah, I know. Well, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother half hour. But they said, well, Max or Mr. Ivey, we think you would be a great contributor to our business, but we can't talk to you until you fill out an application. So I filled out an application for the job. 30 minutes later, I get an email saying, Mr. Ivey, we appreciate you applying for the position, but you're not qualified for it. I was waiting for you to laugh. I was worried you weren't going to laugh. Everybody laughs at that point. I had that same conversation with 4 different people at AudioEye, all the way up to the COO. And so they said, Max, we want you to write for us. We want you to bring your storytelling ability to talk about accessibility. So I started doing that. Then they asked me to do some site reviews. And just recently, they hired me to be one of the hosts of one of their podcasts. So I am living the dream of podcast hosts everywhere. I'm actually making money off of a show. It ain't my show. I would rather have people sponsoring my show if anybody out there wants to get involved in accessibility. But as you know, there are very few people in the podcasting arena who are making a living or even making income on a regular basis from it. So I'm very, very blessed that they did that. And so basically over the last, let's go back to, March of 2021. So a very short period of time, 3.5 years, I've gone from not knowing I was an expert to going, okay, I may be the expert, but this ain't what I want to do for my life, to, okay, I'm the expert. People want me to do it. They'll pay me to do it. Oh, wait a minute. They'll pay me to do it. I wanted to mention that twice because that's an important part. And so eventually I relented and I said, look, these people obviously are better business people than I am, and they would know if I'm worth what they're offering. So I took the job, and I've been very happy. It's led to my becoming a columnist for PHP Architect magazine. I have my own column every month called Barrier Free Bites. It got me a gig reviewing products for Reviewed magazine before they recently had to close up shop due to lack of income, thanks to a Google a Google algorithm update. Thanks, Google. You put one of my favorite gigs out of business. Feel free to delete that from the podcast if you think it'll get either of us in trouble.
No, this is an unfiltered discussion. So if they don't have thick skin, it's too bad.
Yeah, so basically the point here, people, is that when you run a business, there are going to be times where opportunities are going to come along, and a lot of them are going to either be opportunities that you don't feel like you're meant to have or qualified for, and you may say no to something that would take you in a whole different, better direction. And at other times, there are going to be opportunities you're going to talk yourself into taking, and you're going to hate them 5 minutes after you sign the contract because they're not perfect for you. They're just a source of income. And trust me, I'm glad AudioEye isn't one of those kinds of people. But here I am. I'm 59 now. So in 21, I was, 56. It's a little late in my life to be changing professions, careers, brands again, because I've been the blind blogger. I've been Mr. Midway. I've been Mr. What's Your Excuse or No Excuses. And I'm still those guys on various days. But, nowadays I'm the accessibility advantage, which is accessibility is in everyone's best interest. And the people who understand that will have a competitive advantage over the people who don't. So I really encourage you. I know it's hard. I've had this problem myself. It is really hard in the moment to take even 5 minutes and go, let me think about my life and my business and the opportunities that I currently have available to me and see if I'm going in a direction that I want to go in. And if you are, then how do you get there? How do you make more money and have more peace in the short term? If you're not, how do you support yourself, sustain yourself, and possibly sustain your family or your employees while you change gears and go to a different brand? These are the hard decisions they don't teach in business school. They don't teach you how to say no in business school. And trust me, and I'm sure every person that's listening to this has run a business for more than a month is thinking, yeah, somebody really should teach us how to say no. Like I say, here I am, 59 years old. I am once again evolving and rebranding. And I really feel like I've found my perfect place because not only am I doing stuff I love, but I have a unique take on this subject. I mean, I recently interviewed a woman from my podcast who agrees with me on how we have to see accessibility as an advantage rather than a challenge. That makes 2 of us that I know of. It's a small number of people who don't start every conversations with, you're going to get sued, you're going to get fined, you're going to get shunned, you're going to get boycotted. And the truth of the matter is, starting from a point of fear doesn't help anybody, because here's what happens. A woman recently gave me a wonderful example on this that only a mom could come up with, but it's perfect. She said, if you use fear of punishment to make a kid clean a room, they will clean the room to a surface level. But they'll put stuff under the bed, they'll put stuff in the closet, they will hide stuff in other kids' rooms just so they can make it look clean enough so that you won't yell at them, punish them, take their toys away from them. But if you can convince them that having a clean room is in their best interest in some way, say, like maybe it allows them to find their toys, or maybe it allows them to be able to keep their games and their stuff longer because they're taking better care, whatever that story you tell them is, then they're not just going to keep the room clean to the surface level. They're going to take pride in it. They're going to care about it. They're going to come at it from a position of love rather than a position of fear. And so that's why I really believe that accessibility, we have to change the way we talk about it, because we've been using fear for 50 years, ever since the National Rehabilitation Act, and 30 years since the Americans with Disabilities Act, and just this year with the new regulations from the Department of Justice here in the United States, and the new regulations that just came out over in the UK, and the update to the WCAG guidelines. None of that stuff works. Why doesn't it work? Because that's fear. We have to get people to buy into accessibility. And so I have 3 points that I like to make on that subject. If it would be okay, I can give people the 3 main reasons why they should personally care about accessibility and inclusion in their business.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Actually, I have a 4th one, but it's about inclusion instead of accessibility. So, well, I've got to distinguish them because they are different. So for accessibility first, as I mentioned before, whenever you improve accessibility, you're going to improve the user experience for everyone else. A perfect example of that is choosing a simple layout for your website, having a minimal number of items on your homepage, so that when people visit your website on a mobile device, they can actually see the stuff they need to get to and then buy something from you. One of my favorite examples of accessibility is offering people the option of inverting the text color palette so that they can have white text on a black background, which not only is easier on the eyes, but it's easier to read in extremely low or extremely bright light. So a lot of people on their mobile devices can visit your website and comprehend it better if you give them that option that was intended for people with disabilities. And just a couple of in-person things. Talking GPS was a thing for blind people first. We had to pay $600-700 a piece if we had the money to invest in what was called a Trekker at the time. And the curve cutouts that were, people were still fighting over for people in wheelchairs, I understand delivery men love those puppies. So these are examples of both online and in person where improving accessibility improves user experience and will create goodwill that can translate into more profits and a healthier bottom line. The second thing is, when you improve accessibility, you improve search engine optimization. One of the most notable places is with the alt text, because when you add that alt text to your images, it's indexed by Google, and I tell people that you have 150 characters before Google stops paying attention. And I strongly encourage people to use at least half of that to describe the image, because the truth is you spent a lot of time and care creating these images to be compelling to people who can see them. The descriptions of them for people who can't, whether they be blind or computers like Google and Bing and Siri, those descriptions need to be compelling so they can attract people to your website. Headings are also appreciated. A consistent web structure. These are things that Google respects, and it's getting better and better at determining whether or not you actually care about accessibility when you design your website. Don't ask me how it does it, because I personally don't understand Google and don't want to. I'm one of those Neanderthals who's like, if I create good content, Google will notice. That's the way I look at Google.
That's a good philosophy.
But it's the easiest way to do it, because if you spend all your time trying to game Google, you'll go crazy, you'll go broke, and you may not be able to keep any of the customers you do attract. That's my opinion. So improving accessibility improves search engine optimization. The third thing is people don't realize how big the market is among people with disabilities, and it's even more than just the numbers, because here's one of those places where the disability community is doing a horrible job of expressing the information correctly, because people will say that there's between 1 in 5 to 1 in 7 people have disabilities around the world. They'll tell you it's 1 billion people globally. They'll say it's 50 or 60 million people in the US alone. But those are just the raw numbers. That doesn't get to what really brings in the purchasing power of people with disabilities, or the clout of people with disabilities. And here's where I like to go with that. So you have those people with disabilities. Because most people still ignore our needs in accessibility and inclusion, we tend to be very loyal consumers. We will stay with a company during good times and bad times. We will also often overpay for a product. Now, I've since realized that saying overpay is the wrong way to say that. What we do is, because so few people care about accessibility, we see a quality product provided in an accessible manner as an added value. So we perceive this added value because of the effort it took them to be inclusive, whether that's just deciding that they wanted to be or actually taking action. So that part there, where we see an added value in accessibility, those things make us loyal consumers and make us the kind of people that most businesses should want to have in their customer base. But beyond that, beyond the raw numbers, loyalty over pay, is we will self-advocate. We will promote to friends, families, social media communities, and trust me, there are some people out there in the disability community who have huge followings that still don't have ad revenue, because a lot of the companies that are looking into using those sources to promote their businesses just don't see somebody with a disability as being the kind of person they want to represent their brand.
Yep.
We will share with our social media communities, friends, family, coworkers. I like to say we'll even tell people we don't like, because there's just that okay, I'm going to throw a number at you, and I want you to get ready for this, because this number astounds people when I share it with them, okay? Depending on who you ask, anywhere from 3 to 5% of what's on the internet right now is accessible. 3
Wow.
to 5. I'm not saying 30, I'm not saying 50, I'm not saying 35. I'm saying 3 to 5, somewhere in that range is accessible. And that's hideous.
Yeah.
But that means that those 3 to 5%, they have an advantage over that other 95 to 97%, because like I say, we will eventually find the companies that are willing to make the effort. And that's the thing, it's making the effort. And then I said I would mention a fourth thing, and this is more in the area of inclusion because it has to do with employment. And that is for those companies that are willing to make the effort to try to attract and hire people with disabilities, they will find that they end up getting employees who are generally positive, optimistic, dedicated, loyal, thankful, grateful. But you know what their best attribute is, these employees with disabilities?
Yeah.
Because they have to do it on a daily basis, employees with disabilities are generally some of the most creative problem solvers you're ever going to have on your team. Because in most cases, people don't solve our problems for us. We have to solve them ourselves. And if you do that throughout your adolescent life, you do that for, say, half your adult life, you get really good at it. And of course, most companies don't realize how little money it often takes to make the accommodations to hire somebody with a disability. And the really cool thing is if they'll make the process of connecting the potential employee to their business easier, more accessible, the employees will be more than happy to help the employer come up with options that work for everybody and do it with the least upheaval and for the least cost. And there are also lots of nonprofit organizations, and there's even quite a bit of government funding depending on which country you live in. So there's a lot of benefits, and there's even we're starting to have some research on the psychological benefits of adding people with disabilities to teams. And they're saying that teams are much more effective and have much lower incidence of burnout than the teams that don't have somebody with a disability as part of their team. Now, you still have to find somebody who's qualified, but come on.
Yeah.
75% of the world's disability population is unemployed right now, man. There's lots of us out here that's got skills that needs work, but It takes employers who understand the value that they're going to get for the what effort they're willing to put out there. And so I strongly encourage people to address accessibility and inclusion. And these are topics that, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about. I'd be happy to talk in more detail with anybody who has more questions. And I'm really hoping that that I can meet some people who have opportunities for me to share through other podcasts or speaking opportunities. And I really enjoy it when I get the opportunity to help a small or medium-sized business owner embrace accessibility to their benefit. I love Alex at Podmatch. He's a great friend, a great supporter, a wonderful mentor. But his company is also the kind that I really want to do business with. I got no interest in working with enterprise level companies. I mean, if one of them cats wants to throw a big check at me, I'll take it. I'll do the work.
Take it and run. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But I mentioned earlier, that when you're a business owner, you really have to keep in mind is what I'm doing for my business, is it going to provide me the kind of satisfaction that allows me to do the work with joy? And so I have learned over time that I am much happier creating content, whether that's for myself or for other people's, whether that's articles, blog posts, podcast episodes, webinars, speaking, whatever. I really get energized by creating content. Controversially, or whatever the opposite of those would be, is enjoy doing site evaluations if I'm invested in the company I'm doing them for. But I don't enjoy doing site evaluations if I'm just doing it because somebody said, hey, Max, we hear you're the guy. We want you to do this. So I'm really kind of like a method actor. The more invested I am in the people that I'm working with, the more I enjoy it, the quicker I get it done, the better job I do. Those are things I have to take into consideration when I consider taking new work. Is this person somebody I can root for? Is this business a business that I can have pride in? Is their goal for accessibility the same goal or close to the same goal that I have for it? Because I've done jobs where they only wanted the minimum level of accessibility, and that doesn't satisfy me either. To me, you evaluate everything for accessibility, and then you go beyond that to get into workflow and to make sure that the website is navigable based on how people with disabilities, how people using adaptive technology tend to actually, in the real world, navigate websites and apps. So those are the kind of questions that, if as a business owner, especially if you're already feeling stressed, strained, frustrated, the last thing you want to do when times are bad is to take on somebody that isn't the ideal person for you. And it's hard. It's really hard to say no to those people. My dad used to say, Max, if somebody has money in their hand, take it. That's one of the worst lessons that man ever taught me. Worst lesson.
Dear.
And I learned a lot of great lessons at his feet. Like, if you don't ask, they can't say yes. Or, that positivity and finding joy in life is an active decision that takes regular effort. I learned a lot of good things from him. I learned that there's no shame in asking for help. And so now I do a talk on interdependence, which is one of my most well received, because business owners are the worst at asking for help or accepting help. And since I'm here to try to help entrepreneurs, I'm going to share this expression with y'all, because this is one of the most important things I can teach anybody. And that is, none of us are intended to do difficult, challenging things by ourselves. That could be hiring employees. That could be getting help from friends or family. That could be taking help from people on the internet. It could be whatever your method is. We're not intended to do this stuff alone. Just look at all the big hero movies. There's always an entourage, and there's always an ensemble cast. If you're not willing to ask for help or accept help when it's offered, you're going to have a lot harder time. It's going to take longer, be harder. You're going to have less joy. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to try to put the focus on the other person for just a few minutes and say to yourself, when I refuse to ask, I rob the other person of the joy they would have received. And I'm going to say that one more time, because, like I said, it's the most important thing I can teach anybody. When you refuse to ask, you rob the other person of the joy they would have received.
Yeah.
Because most everybody loves helping other people. We all get a charge out of doing something nice, whether it's something nice for a family member, for somebody you meet on the street, for somebody at work. We all feel better. So you're actually making other people's lives harder by not asking. And the really cool thing is there are a lot of people out in the world who've spent years of their lives honing a skill, learning about a particular field of study, And one of the most enjoyable things they will do all day is get to talk about that subject and educate somebody else about that subject who has a sincere interest to learn. So please don't be afraid to ask. And that applies to opportunities as well as help, because I've found the same business owners who are afraid of looking weak by asking for help are afraid of looking egotistical by asking for opportunities. And then, of course, there's the really ego, the giant dinosaur that breathes fire. When somebody comes along and offers to help you, but you didn't ask them for the help. And we all get that. I've known a lot of people with disabilities in my lifetime who the last thing you ever wanted to do was offer to help them because it was just going to tick them off. But the thing is everybody has that little bit of ego that says, who are you? Who do you think you are? I don't need your help. Go help somebody who needs it. But I tell people, have some graciousness, have some gratitude for the effort, because your response to that person who reached out to you will affect whether or not they reach out to anybody else in the future. But here's the really important thing. You didn't ask. You didn't physically call somebody on the phone or send them an email and ask, but here's what you do. So we all put stuff out into the world without thinking about it. We will say things in conversations that we don't know we said, or that are interpreted by the other person in a way we didn't intend because they know us or because they're just intuitive people who listen and who care. When we post stuff on social media, even when we're not ranting, we will still leak things out into the world that show what we want or what we need. When we have personal emails with people who know us well, we will reveal things to them. And sometimes if you do enough interviews like I do, you say stuff in interviews that you're like, later on, you're like, did I actually discuss that with somebody that's going out into the world? And you're like, well, yeah, I did, but it's kind of my brand at this point. So don't ever be afraid to ask for help or opportunities. If offered help or opportunities, please accept them graciously and turn them down graciously if you honestly don't need the help. And what's really cool is if you don't need their help, try to point them at somebody who does need their help. Let's try to keep the inertia going where people who have abilities teach and people who don't have abilities learn, because the longer I do this, the longer I learn that there's stuff I don't know and there's stuff I've known that I forget. And I have to occasionally be reminded of important things from time to time. So I do hope that, speaking about interdependence, about being willing to allow other people into your journey and your story, will help some of you unlock those blocks that have been holding you and your business back. And if maybe you don't make a real leap because of it, maybe you'll have a little bit more peace because of it. Maybe you'll feel a little bit better during the struggle by letting some other people into your journey. That's just my opinion on the subject. Hopefully at a future time I can talk to you about finding solutions and being determined to find the positive and the importance of authentic storytelling, both for yourself and your followers.
Yeah. Well, is that all? I mean, that was just 4 points. I mean, there's not much that we covered there.
I know.
There-
Just 4 points, man. But those were 4 big points. They were like in flashing neon or something, man. I mean,
Exactly. Well, there's so much to unpack there, Max. And one of the things I wanted to touch on is until I got your mail, I'd never actually taken accessibility seriously in my working life, because I had then had a look at my website and then looked at my emails, and then I made sure that when I sent an email to you, I tried to make it as clear as possible. But then I started thinking how there's no training on accessibility really. So this is a super exciting opportunity for folks to, with a little bit of work, make a huge impact on folks with disabilities. And yeah, I had a nice point over here. You've obviously got a fantastic memory as well. I mean, I can remember 2 or 3 things. You had 4 points, and I was waiting. I'm sure he's going to forget the 4th point. He hasn't got it written down. But
yeah, I know you're probably
yeah,
a Formula One fan that goes to the track waiting for the crashes too.
yeah. Well, I know I'm not that bad, But another point that you picked up that I really love is the importance of having, people with disabilities in your team. And I think one of the reasons this is quite useful, and I'm going to talk from a selfish perspective here. My grandfather was paralyzed by an armed robbery at his so for 25 years he was paralyzed. They beat him on his head as well. So he had only half of his left side was working, right-hand side wasn't working. And they cut out his speech center because there was swelling on the brain. So he couldn't speak, and he was ambidextrous, so they did the opposite side by mistake. Anyway, so he lost his speech center and his writing center, so he couldn't write and he couldn't speak, but everything was still functional in his brain. And I remember listening to him having all these cassettes of books that people had taken the time to. This is the early audiobook days, and how those audiobooks made a tremendous difference to his life. But where it impacted me most, and this is where I'm talking about that selfish side again, is that I looked at how my grandfather sort of struggled with his disability, but it never got him down, always a smile, and he just continually pushed forward. And what it did for me is that whenever I feel a bit down in the mouth, whenever I feel a bit things are not going as well, or what a terrible day I've had, I look at my grandfather and say, it could be a hell of a lot worse. And it lifts my spirits up, saying, if he can do it, this little molehill that I'm dealing with is absolutely not an issue. And that's just from my personal experience, the impact that having my grandfather, who had terrible disabilities, impacted my life and has made me a much stronger person. And I think people having role models like that, and he is absolutely a role model for me, is such an important thing.
Right. I appreciate you sharing this personal story, and I don't consider it selfish at all, because I personally feel like if you hadn't shared that story, it would have been selfish. That's just the way I look at things. That's one of the things that's really starting to surprise me is when I had my main podcast, which I hope to restart in the new year, called What's Your Excuse, where I actually interviewed people with disabilities, I hardly ever got stories of my aunt, my uncle, my younger brother had this disability or had this injury or was, affected by trauma like gunshot or whatever. But since I've been focusing on accessibility, it seems like every time I sit down at the mic, the host is telling me a story. And I almost feel like I should be collecting these stories, because one of the things that I agree with you on is being exposed to someone with a disability changes the way you look at the world. It changes the way you feel about yourself. It can give you optimism and hope when you really need it the most. And so why should it be a surprise that having somebody with a disability on a team makes the team better?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, so for me, that from a personal perspective, very important, and it has absolutely impacted my life. And it has also made me slightly less accepting of people who make excuses. So exactly what you say. What's your excuse? I look at when I see beggars and I see these folks hobbling about, and I say, my grandfather had one leg, one arm, one eye, one, whatever else he had, and he still, contributed and did his thing. So yeah. So I just want to talk about one accessibility thing. And this is about what is the starting point for a small business to leverage somebody like you in terms of, say you've got a website, social media. I mean, the thing is that, Maxwell, where do you start? I have no idea. I look at the website. Okay. Do you need, the alt text, you mentioned that. I make sure that's done. That's great. But colors, do I have to now change everything? What is the sort of starting point for somebody who would like to do it and believes it's the right thing, but has absolutely no idea how to start? What is your process?
All right, so I love what you just said there, because I can't tell you how many people I have talked to about accessibility who have handed their website over to somebody else and they have never looked at their own website. So, just like you wouldn't send a manuscript off to a publisher without proofing it more than once, really the starting point is to review your own website, your processes on your website, your forms, which are the lifeblood of any site, whether it's a form for information or a form to make a sale, your navigation on your website. And so where I tell people, what I've learned over the last few months in doing interviews is something that I really didn't notice until recently is that not only does improving accessibility improve usability, but owners who focus on user experience will often have the side benefit of improving accessibility. So these are the things I talk about people where to start with. I don't think you need to worry so much about colors unless your foreground and your background colors are so close to each other that somebody with vision loss but not total blindness wouldn't be able to read your website. But hopefully you wouldn't have pink on salmon to start with because you wouldn't want to train the eyes
Green on
of
yellow.
people who can't see. So I feel like you're probably okay on your color choices. Most people are going to go with the defaults from website building kit or their content management system that they use for their website. But here's where I tell people to start. Like I say, focus on user experience, and that'll get you a long way towards accessibility. So the first thing is focus on the most important thing, because a lot of web business owners feel like they got to put everything on their homepage because they don't want a chance somebody's going to miss something and then they won't get people's money. So the first thing is focus on the most important thing. Why did you build this website? Why did you start this business? Why do you want me to come to this website? What is the purpose? Is the purpose to sell me a product? Then I need to be able to navigate through your choices of products, get relevant information, be able to make a confident decision and progress to a checkout process in a short, smooth, easy manner. Are you trying to sell a service? Then I need to be able to review the information and find out if you're the right person, the right consultant or coach. And possibly that leads to scheduling an exploratory call, buying a book or a course, whatever your business model is for that website, you want to focus on that. And so if you'll do that, that will eliminate a lot of stuff because you'll eliminate a lot of the clutter that causes problems for people who it already takes longer for them to visit your website because of the adaptive technology we use. Focus on the most important thing is the first thing. Yeah, that's the most. And every time I say that, especially if I say it to webmasters, they're like, "That's obvious. Why is that accessibility?" I'll tell them, "It is an accessibility, but it'll get you there." I feel like it ought to be, but it's not in the WCAG, sadly. So, second thing is go with a simple design, because anytime you add something fancy, and the webmasters are big on stuff to keep people's attention and keep them on your website. Anytime you do something fancy, there's a chance that you can cause an accessibility issue. One of my most common headaches is what are called modals, which basically is like somebody wants me to sign up to their email list before I even know whether or not I want to be on their email list. And they have this pop-up and there's no way for me to get out of it, because they didn't think to design a close button. So I end up closing the website, sometimes closing my browser, and sometimes saying bad words to my computer about that website builder.
I'm sorry, that name doesn't exist.
Yeah, well, I say things to make people laugh. Do not worry about it or apologize for it. If you don't laugh, then I get nervous, okay? So
Yeah.
I'm going to start putting that in my emails to podcast hosts. If you don't laugh, then I'm going to get nervous. So feel free to respond naturally.
Well, I mean, I can imagine, I teach, and it's the difference between when I try and consider your worldview. I've got the opportunity to teach people in a class, and you've got to teach it on Zoom. And there's a reduction in the feedback that you get versus what you'd get in a class when you are, with people. And that's kind of how I see it a little bit from a classroom perspective.
That's a great example. I'm going to steal that because you're right. Because, I'm a public speaker and I've done both virtual and in person. And even with the same number of people in the audience and with similar audience responses, the in-person response is just different. It's a level above what you can get from the virtual because you don't have the vibration of the air. You don't have all the noises in the meeting room you're in. You don't have the sighs, the oohs. You don't have all this stuff filtered out by Zoom. Yeah.
You forgot the snores.
Yeah, well, that too. But but I'll admit it. I'm a ham. I enjoy having the microphone in my hand and talking to people about things I care about.
Nonsense.
So the second thing is go with minimal designs, because anytime you add something fancy, you leave yourself open for accessibility problems. Third thing is have a minimalist approach, especially to your homepage. Really look at your homepage and think, do these links, buttons, whatever, need to be here? Or can they be on a secondary page? Or do I not even need them on my website at all? Because the fewer items you have, the quicker I can get to the thing that I came to your website for in the first place. So that would be another thing. Minimalist, fewer links, fewer pictures. Of course, webmasters hate hearing that because that's like exactly the opposite of what they want to do. Then after that,
if I'm ever irritated with one of my blind friends, or if, for example, you annoy me, Max, what I'm going to do is on all of the alt, I'm going to put 40 photos just under the header and fill up that alt text with essays before you
yeah,
get to
fill
that
it up.
button.
No, that's not it. No. I can give you one that's worse. Stuff it with business keywords. That's the worst. When your alt text is just marketing text, that's the worst. But I do have a.
I'm going to put a joke in one of my alt texts one day, I think.
I love it. I think
That would
that's
be
the. I
hilarious.
mean, look, it shows you understand that blind people are just people who are blind. Okay, to make it
Yeah.
as simple as I can make it. But I do have a couple more points that are really helpful for people just starting out who maybe aren't ready to hire somebody or don't have the budget to hire somebody, or maybe they're a little fearful about exactly how disruptive it'll be to have somebody help them redo their website or their app. So people, this is an important thing I'm going to share with you that most people in the disability community don't even talk about enough because they assume everybody else knows this. And this is when you use adaptive technology, whether it is a screen reader like I use, because I'm almost totally blind, or screen magnification, or mechanical switch devices, or voice to text devices, you do not have access to a mouse. So since I don't have access to a mouse, I can't do all the fancy click things. So build your website from keyboard access first.
I actually tried that out for the first time on my new Mac, where I could use, it had numbers. It was quite weird, and it must obviously take you a bit of time to figure that out.
Yeah, there's a learning curve to everything, so, but I would, start with, I understand that people want users to be able to use the rotor on their Mac desktops. They want people to be able to use the hover cards and be able to swipe and use their track. They want people to be able to do that because people expect to be able to do that. And it's all fine. But please start with keyboard design first. If you're not going to have keyboard be your main form of navigation, please come up with a list of keyboard combinations that people can use to cut through all the other junk and get where we need to go, and make those available on your website so that we can find them and put them in your accessibility statement. Everybody should have, even if your accessibility statement is just boilerplate saying we're doing what we can, we care, we're trying, whatever. Every website needs to have a statement, and there's lots of examples on the internet where you can get one and apply it to what you're able to do at this point. But if you're not going to design for keyboard access first, please create keyboard combinations, create a cheat sheet, put it in your accessibility statement so people can get up to speed on a new website more quickly. We already talked about alt text. The next thing we need to talk about is headers. Headers are your friend. They will allow somebody with a disability to get from the most important thing to the second to the third very quickly. We depend a lot on headings to more easily navigate websites. So headings are your friend, and it's really good if somebody puts some thought into their headings and goes, okay, the main page is heading 1, a category is heading 2, items within a category are heading 3, and so on. And then within a heading, I generally find for screen reader users that it's best if the heading has the label first, then the image with the alt text, then the text, then a link or button if there is one. I feel like that's the ideal order for each individual heading so that it can be quickly read, and you can determine pretty soon whether that's the heading or subheading that you need before you let your screen reader read all that information to you. And that's the thing. When you use a screen reader, you spend a lot of time telling it to shut up.
Well, Max, before we end up, I just want to check if you've got this superpower that I think you might have because of your experience with the screen readers. And those screen readers go at quite a pace, right?
Some people's do. I'm kind of slow compared to the average. I have mine set at 65 or 70, and a lot of people I know go 85, 90% of the available speed. But I like to understand what I'm hearing instead of just hearing it.
Yeah, because I've been around quite a few blind folks, and the speed that those readers go through is crazy. Which means that you probably are one of the few people to be able to decipher what those horse bidders are doing. One bidder, two bidder, three bidder, four bidder, four, five,
Uh,
bidder. Right, right. You can probably like. I know exactly what he's talking about. He's saying three bids and.
yeah, I can't do that. That isn't one of my superpowers. I'm a shameless promoter. I'm an expert at asking for what I want and helping other people ask. I have a lot of superpowers. Basically, I don't know how to be afraid of stuff, which is one of those things I really wish I could teach others about. Because in my lifetime, I've done a lot of things without thinking about them. Just going, okay, I either need to do this or I'd like to do this, and then doing it. And
Max, we're going to have another session because
okay,
otherwise we're going to drive people mad with the sound of both of our voices. So what I'd what I'd like to do is just thank you again for sharing some of these insights with us, and not just insight. I think this is super valuable. After I was doing the research for this interview, because I've got tons more questions, but we can do that next time. But there's so much that I don't understand in the space, and I'm in the digital space, and such small changes that can be made to make people much happier to use your product, and obviously much more accessible for them. So, and open you up to a new market and all of these things. And as you said, it's not about being punitive. I don't know any, I've hardly had any disabled person come and say, "Oh, you wicked person." They're always trying to be helpful, trying to say, "Hey, look, it's a
you
very
hang out with
positive
the right
space."
kind the right kind of you hang out with the right kind of disabled people is all I can tell you. Because if you want, I can introduce you to some people that
No,
are
no,
really
no, no. I've
completely
also got
happy
a
in their
short
lives.
memory, so I also forget the bad experiences. But
Oh, okay.
Max, to close this off, where can I send folks to find more information about you? And if they're interested in your services, how can they get hold of you?
Sure. They can go to theaccessibilityadvantage.com. They can send an email to Maxwell at theaccessibilityadvantage.com, or they can look for Maxwell Ivey, which is spelled Ivey, on all the major social media platforms. I'd like to do something now that I've been doing recently. You're welcome to edit it out if you don't like it, but I'm a singer and amateur songwriter, and I've been working on this song about accessibility, and I think it's pretty good. I'm
You
going
go
to sing
ahead.
it.
You go ahead. No,
I'm going
go
to
ahead.
sing it, and you can delete it if you want to, but I think it's pretty good. So here we go, okay? Accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities. Makes the world better for everyone, online as well as in person. Brings more people to your side every day and every night. Most people forget about us. It makes you grow within our eyes. Disabled people, we tell our friends and share to our social sites. Don't think about how hard it is. Just focus on those dollar signs. 'Cause accessibility ain't just for those with disability.
Well, that is lovely. And you've got a lovely tone. Yeah, I love it. So that will stay in. So that will be closing off our show.
It's up to you. I appreciate your time because I feel like we've gone way over what you planned on, but you did a very good job of bringing me back to important points, which is good because I've been working on that, but I'm still not good at that. I tend to get talking about a particular subject and then forget, Max, you're here to talk about accessibility and you're here to try to generate business, but it's hard for me to do that because I just feel like once I start talking to somebody, it's a conversation, it's not a promotion.
Absolutely. So I was thinking I'm going to have to stop you again now, but you've got such a lovely tone, such a warm energy. I really appreciate you coming on the call, Max. And yeah, I'm going to make some of these changes to my own website and also in my own organization. So you will see somebody who's taken your advice, at least on this podcast. And I'm sure the listeners have taken some great value out of this as well. So Max, thank you so much again.